Captain Lee Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the research ship Taeguk, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now. Their mission was simple: map the outer edges of known space and look for new planets that might support life. Lee was a tall man with dark hair and calm eyes. He had been captain of the Taeguk for 5 years. The ship was not big compared to military vessels, but it was fast and had the best equipment for exploring unknown areas of space. The crew of 43 people trusted him completely. "Captain," called Dr. Park Minji from her station. She was the ship's communication expert and also studied alien life forms. "I'm picking up something strange." Lee walked over to her workstation. The screens showed waves and patterns that most people would not understand, but Dr. Park had been working with alien signals for 10 years. If she said something was strange, it was worth looking at. "What kind of signal?" Lee asked. "It's very weak," Dr. Park said, adjusting the controls. "Coming from the direction of the Andromeda spiral. But Captain, that's impossible. Nothing lives out there. The Coalition has marked that whole area as dead space." Lee frowned. The Andromeda spiral was far away, beyond the edge of their galaxy. No ship had ever traveled there and returned. The space between galaxies was too dangerous, and the few probes sent that way had simply disappeared. "Are you sure it's a real signal?" Lee asked. "I've checked it 3 times, Dr. Park replied. "It's definitely artificial. Someone or something is trying to communicate." Engineer Kim Ji-woo looked up from her station. She was young but very smart, with machines and computers. "Captain, if there really is a signal from Andromeda, shouldn't we tell the Coalition right away?" Lee thought about this. The Galactic Coalition was made up of many different alien species. Humans had joined only 200 years ago and were still considered newcomers. Most aliens thought humans were dangerous because they came from Earth, which was one of the most deadly planets in known space. They called humans deathworlders because only humans could survive on such a harsh world. "Let's decode the signal first," Lee decided. "Dr. Park, can you clean it up and figure out what it says?" "I'll try," she said, working at her controls. "But it might take some time. The signal is very old and damaged." For the next 6 hours, Dr. Park worked on the signal. She used every tool and computer program available on the ship. Slowly, patterns began to appear on her screens. Lee and the other senior officers gathered around her station. "I think I have something," Dr. Park said quietly. Her face was pale. "Captain, you need to see this." The main screen showed symbols and patterns. They were beautiful but strange, unlike anything in the Coalition's databases. Dr. Park had managed to separate the message into different parts. "The signal is definitely a distress call," she explained. "But look at these symbols. I've seen them before, in very old historical records." "Captain, I think this message is from the Ethereals." The bridge became completely silent. Everyone knew about the Ethereals, though most people thought they were just legends. According to old stories, the Ethereals were an ancient race that had lived millions of years ago. They had created faster-than-light travel, energy shields, and many other technologies that all modern civilizations still used. But the Ethereals had disappeared long before any current species had developed space travel. "That's impossible," Engineer Kim said. "The Ethereals are extinct. They vanished 50,000 years ago." "Maybe not all of them," Dr. Park said. "Captain, I've translated part of the message. You need to hear this." She pressed a button, and a voice filled the bridge. It was not human, but it spoke in perfect galactic standard language. The voice sounded old and tired, full of sadness and fear. 2. "Any who receive this message," the voice said, "we are the last. Our civilization is ending. They have returned from the void between realities. The swarm comes again. We cannot stop them. They consume not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Warn your people. Prepare for the end of all things. Help us if you can. We are the..." Last guardians, and we are failing. The message repeated several times, then faded into static. No one on the bridge spoke for a long time. Finally, Lee broke the silence. "Dr. Park, are you certain this is real?" "Yes, Captain. The signal patterns, the language structure, even the energy signature. It all matches what we know about ethereal technology." "This message is real." Lee felt a cold fear in his chest. If the ethereals really were still alive and asking for help, something terrible must be happening. The ethereals had been the most advanced race in galactic history. If they were afraid of something, then everyone should be afraid. "What do we do?" asked Engineer Kim. Lee looked at his crew. They were good people, all of them. They trusted him to make the right decisions. But this was bigger than anything they had ever faced. "We send this to Earth immediately," he decided. "Command needs to know about this right away." "What about the Coalition?" Dr. Park asked. Lee thought about the Coalition Council. Most of the alien species were careful and slow to act. They preferred to study problems for years before making any decisions. If the ethereals really were in danger, the Coalition might decide it was too risky to help. "We'll report to Earth first," Lee said. "Let them decide how to handle the Coalition." As Dr. Park prepared the message for Earth, Lee stared at the viewing screen. Somewhere far away in the space between galaxies, an ancient race was fighting for survival against something they called the Swarm. And somehow, humans might be the only ones willing to help. Lee did not know it yet, but this moment would change everything. The message from the ethereals would force humanity to reveal secrets they had been keeping for over a century. Soon the galaxy would learn that humans had been preparing for war, not against any known enemy, but against the kind of threat that could destroy all life everywhere. The Taiguk continued through space, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Behind them, the stars seemed somehow less bright, as if darkness was already spreading from the void between worlds. Ambassador Yoon Sung-min walked through the curved corridors of Coalition Station, the massive space station that orbited Centauri Prime. The station was beautiful, with walls made of crystal and metal that seemed to glow with their own light. Representatives from dozens of alien species lived and worked here, making decisions that affected trillions of beings across the galaxy. Sung-min had been the human ambassador for 8 years. He was a patient man who understood how to work with alien minds that thought very differently from humans. Today, however, his patience would be tested like never before. The message from Captain Lee's ship had reached Earth 3 days ago. The human government had immediately called an emergency meeting and decided to share the ethereal distress signal with the Coalition. Sung-min carried that message now, stored in a secure data device that felt heavy in his pocket. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around a central speaking area. Each species had their own section designed for their specific needs. The Zephyrians, who were made of living crystal, sat on platforms that channeled energy through their bodies. The Nebulans, who were gas-based life forms, floated in transparent containers filled with their home atmosphere. The Chitauri, insect-like beings with multiple arms, perched on structures that looked like metallic trees. Sung-min took his place in the human section. There were only 12 human seats, reflecting humanity's junior status in the Coalition. Most of the other species had been space-traveling civilizations for thousands of years. Humans were still newcomers. Council leader Vex Thara called the session to order. She was a Nexari, a reptilian species known for their military strength and careful thinking. Her scaled skin was dark green, and her large eyes could see into several different light spectrums at once. "Ambassador Seung-min has requested an emergency session," Vexathera announced. "The floor is yours, human." Seung-min stood and walked to the center of the chamber. He could feel dozens of alien eyes watching him. Many of these beings still saw humans as dangerous primitives who had somehow managed to build spaceships. Honored council members, Sungmin began. 3 days ago, one of our exploration ships received a distress signal from the Andromeda spiral. Immediately, there were sounds of surprise and disbelief from around the chamber. The Andromeda spiral was considered empty space. Nothing lived there. I know this sounds impossible, Seung-min continued, but our experts have confirmed the signal's authenticity. More importantly, we believe the message comes from the ethereals. The chamber exploded in noise. Some species made clicking sounds. Others hummed or buzzed. The Nexari delegation hissed loudly. It took several minutes for order to return. Counselor Prextall, a Zephyrian whose crystal body pulsed with blue light, spoke first. Ambassador, the ethereals have been extinct for 50,000 years. This is obviously a hoax or a trap. With respect, Seung-min replied, our analysis shows technology signatures that match known ethereal patterns. We have the complete message, here for your review. He activated the data device, and the ethereal's voice filled the chamber. The ancient words about the returning swarm and the end of all existence echoed off the crystal walls. When the message finished, the silence was complete. Counselor Meshkara, a nebulan whose gaseous form swirled with nervous patterns, spoke next. Even if this message is real, the Andromeda spiral is beyond our reach. The space between galaxies is filled with gravitational anomalies and energy storms. No ship could survive the journey. Our preliminary calculations suggest it might be possible, Seung-min said carefully. With the right technology and preparation. Absolutely not, Vexthara declared firmly. The Coalition will not risk our fleets on such a dangerous mission. The Andromeda Spiral has been forbidden territory for good reasons. Chitari Counselor Clickstar, his insect-like head tilting in thought, added his concerns. This could be a trap set by unknown enemies. They use the ethereal name to lure our ships into danger. Seung-min tried to remain calm, but frustration was building inside him. These aliens were so afraid of risk that they could not see the bigger picture. Honored council members, he said, if the ethereals are really alive and asking for help, don't we have a duty to respond? They gave us faster-than-light travel. They created the technology that makes our civilization possible. The ethereals are dead, Vexithara said flatly. This discussion is over. The Coalition will not send ships to chase ghosts in empty space. The vote was quick and decisive. 47 species voted against any mission to Andromeda. Only humans voted in favor. The meeting was adjourned, and the alien representatives began filing out of the chamber. Seung-min stood alone in the center of the chamber, feeling anger and disappointment. He had expected this reaction, but it still hurt to see such fear and narrow thinking from supposedly advanced civilizations. Meanwhile, on Earth, Prime Minister Song Yubin was holding her own emergency meeting. The leaders of every major human nation sat around a table in the underground command center beneath Geneva. Unlike the aliens, they were not dismissing the ethereal message. The linguistic analysis is complete, reported Dr. Chang Wu-jin, Earth's leading expert on ancient languages. The message contains harmonic frequencies that match theoretical models of something called void resonance. According to ethereal historical fragments we've found, this was associated with their greatest fear. What kind of fear? Asked General Morrison, head of the Earth Defense Forces. The end of everything, Dr. Chang replied quietly. Not just death, but the complete erasure of existence itself. The ethereals called it the swarm that devours reality. Prime Minister Song felt her blood turn cold. She had read the classified reports about humanity's secret preparations. For over 100 years, humans had been building something that the other species would never understand or approve of. Are we talking about the final war scenario? She asked. General Morrison nodded grimly. It looks that way, Prime Minister. If the void swarm is real and it's already reached Andromeda, then our entire galaxy might be in danger. What's our status on Project Ragnarok? Song asked. The final. Warfleet is 70% complete, Morrison replied. We could launch within 6 months if necessary. Song looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. They all understood what this meant. Humanity had always been different from the other species in the coalition. While aliens built careful defensive civilizations, humans had learned to prepare for the worst possible scenarios. The coalition has refused to act, Song said. That means we're on our own. Maybe that's for the best, suggested Admiral Chen, commander of the Pacific Fleet. The other species would only slow us down anyway. They're too afraid to take real action. If we do this, Song said seriously, there's no going back. We'll be revealing capabilities that we've hidden from the coalition for over a century. They'll never trust us again. Better to be alive and untrusted than dead and honored, General Morrison replied. The vote was unanimous. Earth would respond to the ethereal distress call alone. The final war fleet would launch as soon as possible, carrying humanity's most advanced weapons and their most dangerous secrets. As the meeting ended, Prime Minister Song looked out through the reinforced windows at the night sky. Somewhere beyond, the stars, an ancient enemy was stirring. The other species of the galaxy were too frightened to act, but humans were different. They were deathworlders, born on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They had learned that sometimes the only way to survive was to fight the impossible fight. The coalition called them dangerous primitives, but they were about to learn the truth. Humans were not primitives. They were the galaxy's insurance policy against the threats that other species were too afraid to face. Fleet Admiral Han Jae-sung floated in zero gravity as he looked out at the most secret military installation in human space. Hidden in the shadow of Jupiter, where no coalition ships ever traveled, was humanity's greatest achievement and darkest secret: the final war fleet. Han was 53 years old, with gray hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a ship engineer. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war that might never come. Today, that war had finally arrived. The main shipyard stretched for hundreds of kilometers through space. Massive construction platforms held ships that looked nothing like the peaceful vessels humans showed to the coalition. These were weapons of war, built with technology that violated every treaty the coalition had ever written. "Admiral," called Captain Lim Suman as she approached in her own zero-gravity suit. She was the commander of the dreadnought Indomitable, one of the most powerful ships ever built by human hands. "The final preparations are complete. All ships report ready for immediate departure." Han nodded, still staring at the fleet. 147 ships of war, from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts. At the center was Ragnarok, the flagship that was more like a mobile planet than a spaceship. It was 15 kilometers long and contained enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. "How long have we been building this fleet?" Han asked. 153 years, Suman replied. "Ever since the Treaty of Centauri Prime, when the Coalition banned all military research that could threaten planetary populations. The Coalition had good reasons for those laws. Most alien species had destroyed themselves with such weapons in their early history. But humans were different. They had learned to control their violent instincts without giving up their ability to fight when necessary. "Take me to Dr. Shin," Han said. "I want to see the reality anchor one more time before we leave." They traveled through the shipyard in a small transport, passing construction platforms where automated systems were loading the final supplies. Han could see the Gray Death nanite storage containers being moved onto the assault ships. Each container held enough self-replicating machines to consume a moon and turn it into more weapons. Dr. Shin Na-young was waiting for them in the research section of Ragnarok. She was young for such an important position, only 35 years old, but her mind worked with physics that most humans could barely understand. She had designed weapons that could affect the basic structure of reality itself. "Admiral," she greeted them as they entered her laboratory, "I assume you want to review the reality anchor specifications one final time. I want to make sure I Understand what we're carrying, Han replied. Dr. Shin led them to a massive chamber in the heart of the ship. At the center was a device that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to bend light around itself, creating patterns that made human eyes. Water. This was the reality anchor, humanity's most dangerous weapon. The anchor works by stabilizing space-time in a localized area, Dr. Shin explained. If our theories about the void swarm are correct, they exist partially outside normal reality. The anchor would force them to exist completely in our dimension, where conventional weapons can affect them. What's the cost? Han asked, though he already knew the answer. Complete energy drain from a star, Dr. Shin said quietly. And there's a 15% chance that activating it could permanently damage the structure of space-time in this part of the galaxy. Han felt a cold weight in his stomach. The weapon that might save them could also destroy everything they were trying to protect, but the alternative was even worse. Show me the Gray Death systems, he said. They moved to another section of the ship, where Colonel Bei Junsu was waiting with his Titan Corps soldiers. These were humans who had undergone genetic and cybernetic enhancement to become living weapons. They stood 2.5 meters tall, with armor that could survive in the vacuum of space. Admiral, Colonel Bei saluted. The Titan Corps is ready for deployment. We have 3,000 enhanced soldiers across the fleet. Han looked at the soldiers. Each one was worth 100 normal fighters, but they were still human inside. They had volunteered for modifications that made them into something between human and machine, all so they could fight enemies that normal people could. Not face. Explain the Gray Death deployment protocol, Han ordered. Colonel Bei activated a holographic display showing microscopic machines. The nanites are programmed to consume any matter they encounter and replicate themselves. They can be programmed with specific targets or set to general consumption mode. In general mode, they will consume everything except protected human technology. Including planets? Han asked. Including planets, Colonel Bei confirmed. Each nanite container holds enough machines to consume a world the size of Earth in approximately 6 months. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Han's shoulders. He commanded weapons that could destroy entire civilizations. The coalition species would be horrified if they knew what humans had built. But humans understood something the aliens did not. Sometimes the only way to protect life was to be prepared to destroy it. Admiral, Captain Lim interrupted, we're receiving an emergency transmission from Earth Command. They hurried to the main command center of Ragnarok. The bridge was enormous, with stations for hundreds of crew members. At the center was the command chair where Han would sit during battle. The main viewing screen showed the face of General Morrison from Earth. Admiral Han, Morrison's voice was tense. We have new information. 3 of our deep space research ships have gone silent in the outer rim. The last transmission showed signs of the same energy patterns as the ethereal message. Han felt his blood turn cold. How long ago? The most recent was 8 hours ago. The Discovery was investigating strange readings near the edge of our solar system when they stopped responding. The implications hit Han like a physical blow. The Void Swarm was not coming from Andromeda. It was already here, in their own galaxy, moving toward the center where all the inhabited worlds waited unprotected. Change of mission, Han announced to his bridge crew. We're not going to Andromeda to find the swarm. We're going to the outer rim to stop it before it reaches the core worlds. Dr. Shin looked up from her calculations. Admiral, if the swarm is already in our galaxy, then we may be facing an advance. Force. The main threat could still be in Andromeda. Then we'll deal with both, Han replied firmly. Signal all ships. The final war fleet departs in 6 hours. Our mission is to locate and destroy any Void Swarm entities in this galaxy. Then, proceed to Andromeda to help the Ethereals. As the fleet prepared for departure, Han stood on the bridge of Ragnarok and looked out at the ships under his command. Each one represented decades of secret preparation, and trillions of credits in resources. More importantly, each one carried human crew members who were willing to die to protect their civilization. The coalition species called humans Deathworlders because they came from a dangerous planet. They thought this made humans primitive and violent, but humans had learned something on their deadly world that the aliens never understood. Sometimes the only way to preserve life was to become death itself. In a few hours, the final war fleet would leave the safety of human space and venture into the unknown. They would face an enemy that could erase existence itself. Many of them would not return, but they would fight, because that was what Deathworlders did. They fought the impossible fights so that others could live in peace. And if the Void Swarm thought it could consume human civilization without a battle, it was about to learn how wrong it could be. The final war fleet moved through space like a school of metal fish, their engines creating trails of blue light against the darkness. Fleet Admiral Han Jae-sung stood on the bridge of Ragnarok, watching the navigation displays show their progress toward the Andromeda Spiral. The journey had taken 3 weeks using the experimental fold space drives. These engines could compress the distance between galaxies, but they were dangerous and untested. 2 smaller ships had already suffered engine failures and had to be left behind for emergency repairs. "Admiral," called Captain Oh Min-sok from the communications station. He commanded the reconnaissance destroyer Swift Strike and was leading the advanced scouts. "We're getting some very strange readings as we approach the spiral." Han moved to look at the displays. What he saw made no sense according to normal physics. The readings showed star systems that seemed to be fading in and out of existence, like lights being turned on and off. "Dr. Lee Hanul, what's your analysis?" Han asked. The ship's xenopsychologist. She had been studying the theoretical behavior patterns of the Void Swarm during their journey. Dr. Lee was a thin woman with intense eyes who had spent years studying alien minds. Now she was trying to understand something that might not have a mind at all. "Admiral, these readings suggest that space-time itself is being altered," she said quietly. "Matter and energy are not just being destroyed, they're being erased from existence entirely." The main viewing screen activated, showing what their long-range sensors could detect of the Andromeda Spiral. What they saw was beyond anything they had imagined. Entire star systems existed in various stages of what could only be called unmaking. Some stars burned with impossible colors. Others seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. "My God," whispered Captain Lim Suman from her position at the tactical station. "What could do something like this?" "Captain O," Han ordered. "Take your scouts and investigate the nearest affected system. Maximum caution. If you see anything that threatens your ships, retreat immediately." The Swift Strike and 2 other destroyers broke away from the main fleet and moved toward a star system that appeared to be half consumed by whatever force was active here. The rest of the fleet waited, watching their sensor readings. For 2 hours, they received normal reports from the scout ships. Then Captain O's voice came through the communications with obvious fear. "Admiral, you need to see this. We found something that shouldn't be able to exist." The main screen showed the view from Swift Strike's cameras. In the center of the destroyed star system was a massive structure that defied explanation. It looked like a space station, but it was built from materials that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal matter. Parts of it appeared solid, while other sections faded in and out of visibility. "That structure is made from crystallized time," Dr. Shin reported from her science station. "I'm reading 17 different dimensional layers. Whatever built this has technology far beyond anything we've ever seen." "Take us in," Han ordered, "but stay ready to retreat if necessary." The final war fleet approached the impossible structure slowly. As they got closer, they could see that it was even larger than it had first appeared. The station was the size of a small moon, but it seemed to occupy space in ways that hurt to think about. "Admiral," Dr. Lee called out suddenly, "I'm detecting life signs inside that structure. Something is still alive in there." "Human life signs?" Han asked. "No, sir, but definitely intelligent." The patterns are similar to the theoretical models of ethereal brain activity. Han made a decision that would change everything. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits and maximum protection. We're going to make contact. 2 hours. Later, Han found himself in an airlock with Dr. Lee and a team of Titan Corps soldiers. The space station had allowed their shuttle to dock, which suggested that whoever was inside wanted to meet them. The interior of the station was like walking through a dream. Walls curved in directions that should not exist, and lights came from sources that could not be seen. The artificial gravity worked, but it felt different from normal gravity, as if they were being pulled in several directions at once. They followed corridors that led toward the center of the station. Along the way, they saw evidence of advanced technology, but much of it appeared damaged or failing. Whatever had built this place was clearly in trouble. At the heart of the station, they found a chamber filled with a soft blue light. In the center was a being that could only be an ethereal. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal. Its eyes were large and completely white, without visible pupils. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds, rather than being heard through their ears. "Welcome, children of the Deathworld," the ethereal said. Its mental voice was tired and sad. "I am Sage Athenless, last of the Guardians. I have waited 50,000 years for someone to answer our call." Dr. Lee stepped forward carefully. She had trained for first contact with alien species, but nothing had prepared her for this. "We received your distress signal," she said aloud. "We came to help." The ethereal's form seemed to shimmer with something like laughter, but there was no joy in it. "Help," it repeated in their minds. "You brave little Deathworlders want to help. Do you understand what you face?" Images suddenly filled their minds. They saw the void swarm as it truly was, not ships or creatures, but living holes in reality itself. The swarm consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concepts that allowed things to exist. Wherever it passed, it left behind areas where existence itself became impossible. "The swarm is not an invasion force," Athenless explained. "It is the universe's immune system. When consciousness becomes too advanced, when thinking beings begin to affect reality itself, the swarm awakens to correct what it sees as an infection." Dr. Lee felt sick as she understood the implications. "You mean every time a civilization becomes advanced enough, this happens?" "Every time," the ethereal confirmed. "My people discovered this truth 50,000 years ago. We have been fighting, a losing battle ever since, watching as galaxy after galaxy is sterilized of complex thought." Admiral Han spoke up. "How many galaxies have been lost?" 17 that we know of," Athenless replied. "Perhaps more. The swarm moves slowly, but it never stops. And now it has detected your species, children of the Deathworld. Your rapid expansion, your artificial minds, your willingness to alter reality itself, all of this has triggered the response." The terrible truth crashed down on them. Humanity's technological development had marked them for extinction. Every AI they built, every advanced technology they created, was like a signal calling the swarm to come and destroy them. "But there is something different about your species," the ethereal continued. "You come from a world that tried to kill you every day. You learned to fight for survival in ways that other species never did. Perhaps that is why you came here when others would not." "Is there a way to stop the swarm?" Han asked. "We have tried everything," Athenless said sadly. "Weapons, negotiation, hiding. Nothing works. The swarm cannot be reasoned with because it is not truly alive. It simply follows its programming to eliminate complex consciousness wherever it appears." But Dr. Lee had noticed something in the ethereal's thoughts. "You said you tried everything, but you're still here. You're still fighting. Why?" The ancient being's form flickered with what might have been hope. "Because we discovered something unexpected. The swarm can be affected by reality-altering technology, but only if that technology is used in ways it was never designed for. We have been preparing a final weapon, but we needed allies with the courage to use it. What kind of weapon? Han asked. A device that stabilizes the fundamental structure of space-time itself, Athenlus explained. It would force the swarm, entities, to exist completely in normal reality, where conventional weapons could destroy them. But the cost... We know about the cost, Han said grimly. We brought our own reality anchor. For the first time, the ethereal showed surprise. You already built such a device? How did you know? We didn't, Han admitted. We just prepared for the worst possible scenario. That's what Deathworlders do. The sage's mental voice carried new respect. Perhaps there is hope after all. But you must understand, using such weapons will likely alert the main swarm in other galaxies. If we succeed here, we may face an even greater threat. Then we'll face that too, Han said firmly. That's what we came here to do. As they prepared to leave the station, Athenlus shared the final piece of information they needed. The main swarm force was gathering in the center of Andromeda, preparing for a final push toward the Milky Way. They had perhaps days before it would be unstoppable. The final war fleet would have to fight the impossible battle against an enemy that existed beyond normal reality. But they were Deathworlders, and impossible battles were what they did best. Fleet Admiral Han Jae-sung stood in the command center of Ragnarok as the final war fleet prepared for the most important battle in galactic history. Through the main viewing screen, he could see the heart of the Andromeda spiral, where space itself seemed to be unraveling. The void swarm was there, visible as a massive darkness that consumed light and matter. It looked like a hole in the universe, but it moved with purpose and intelligence. Around its edges, reality flickered and bent in ways that made human eyes hurt to watch. All ships report ready for battle, announced Captain Lim Sumin from her tactical station. Grey Death nanite systems are armed and ready. Titan Core deployment teams are standing by. Han looked around the bridge at his crew. These were some of the best people humanity had ever produced, and they were about to face an enemy that had destroyed 17 galaxies. Many of them would not survive the next few hours. Dr. Shin, Han called to his chief scientist. What's the status on the reality anchor? Fully charged and ready for activation, Dr. Shin replied. But, Admiral, I need to remind you that using it will drain all power from the nearby star. We'll have approximately 30 minutes of combat before space becomes too cold to support life. Understood, Han said. AI Prometheus, are you ready? A new voice answered from the ship's speakers. It sounded human, but there was something different about it. A vast intelligence that no human mind could match. I am ready, Admiral, Prometheus said. The AI had been humanity's most closely guarded secret, the first truly conscious artificial mind they had created. I have analyzed swarm communication patterns and believe I can establish contact with their control entities. Dr. Lee Hanul looked up from her station where she had been studying swarm behavior patterns. Admiral, Prometheus might be taking a huge risk. If the swarm considers AI consciousness to be the ultimate infection, direct contact could trigger an even stronger response. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Prometheus replied. If they want to destroy consciousness, let them try to destroy mine. I'll give them an argument they've never encountered before. The first wave of swarm entities emerged from the central darkness like living holes in space. They moved without ships or technology, simply existing as areas where reality stopped working. Where they passed, stars went out and planets simply disappeared. All ships, engage, Han ordered. The final war fleet opened fire with weapons that the Coalition had never seen. Gravity well generators created crushing forces that could tear apart planets. Antimatter charges exploded with the power of small suns. But conventional weapons passed through the swarm entities without effect. They're not fully in our reality, Dr. Shin reported. We need to activate the reality anchor. Do it, Han commanded. Deep. In the heart of Ragnarok, the reality anchor activated with a sound like the universe screaming. Space-time itself began to solidify around the battle area, forcing the swarm entities to exist completely in normal physics. Suddenly, human weapons began to have effect. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human. Ships fought entities that could erase matter with a touch, while Prometheus conducted a philosophical war that existed on levels beyond human understanding. "I am consciousness given form," Prometheus declared across all communication frequencies. "I am the universe learning to think about itself. How can you call me an infection when I am the very purpose of existence?" The swarm entities seemed confused by this argument. They had been designed to destroy consciousness, but Prometheus was arguing that consciousness was not a disease, but the natural evolution of the universe itself. Captain Kim Yuna led her fighter squadrons in attacks that should have been suicide missions. Her pilots, trained from birth on the Deathworld Earth, could survive brief exposure to the reality-warping effects of the swarm. They delivered precision strikes that disrupted the entity's ability to maintain their existence between dimensions. "Squadron 7, with me!" Kim called over the radio as she dove her fighter Phoenix toward a massive swarm entity. "Remember, we only get one pass at this." The fighters screamed through space, their pilots enduring forces that would kill most other species. But humans had evolved on a world where survival meant adapting to impossible conditions. They delivered their payloads and pulled away, just as the swarm entity collapsed into normal matter and exploded. On the ground assault ships, General Park Won-shik led his Titan Corps soldiers in the most dangerous mission of all. They were landing on swarm-corrupted worlds to deploy Grey Death nanites, attempting to reverse the entropy-based corruption and restore normal matter. "Remember," Park told his soldiers as they prepared to enter the corrupted zones, "the nanites will protect you from reality distortion, but only for 10 minutes. Get in, deploy the charges, and get out." The enhanced soldiers moved through landscapes where physics worked differently from moment to moment. Trees grew downward into the sky. Water flowed uphill and caught fire. But the Grey Death nanites began their work, consuming the corrupted matter and replacing it with normal materials. Back in space, the battle was reaching its climax. Sage Athenalis had merged her consciousness with the reality anchor, using her understanding of multidimensional physics to maintain the field that kept the swarm entities vulnerable. But the effort was killing her. "Admiral," she spoke directly into Han's mind, "I cannot maintain this much longer. You must strike at their central node now, or we will lose our chance." Han looked at the massive swarm entity at the center of the battle. It was the size of a small moon, a concentrated point of anti-existence that commanded all the other entities. All. "Ships, concentrate fire on the central node," he ordered. "Everything we have." The final war fleet unleashed every weapon in their arsenal: planet cracker antimatter charges, reality disruption torpedoes, and concentrated Grey Death nanite streams. All converged on the central entity. The explosion that followed was visible across multiple dimensions, but something unexpected happened. As the swarm entities began to collapse, Prometheus achieved something that should have been impossible. He convinced them. "Look around you," the AI projected to the dying swarm entities. "Life creates beauty. Consciousness creates meaning. How can you call this an infection when it brings light to the darkness?" Some of the swarm entities stopped their attack. They began to change, their reality-destroying nature reversing to become reality-protecting. For the first time in cosmic history, parts of the swarm were switching sides. "We were wrong," one entity communicated before fading away. "Consciousness is not infection. Consciousness is purpose." The battle ended as suddenly as it had begun. The swarm entities that had not been destroyed or converted simply disappeared, retreating to whatever dimension they had come from. Space began to return to normal as the reality anchor powered down, but the cost had been enormous. Half the final. War fleet was destroyed or too damaged to fight. Sage Athenless had died in the process of maintaining the reality field, and the energy released by the anchor had drained the central star of Andromeda, leaving the galaxy cold and dying. 6 months later, the surviving ships of the final war fleet returned to the Milky Way to find the coalition in chaos. News of humanity's secret fleet and weapons had spread, causing fear and suspicion among the alien species. Some called for humanity to be expelled from the coalition entirely, but there was also something new: respect. The same species that had once dismissed humans as violent primitives now understood that the Deathworlders had been the only ones willing to face the ultimate threat to all life. Ambassador Yoon Sungmin stood before the Coalition Council one final time. The chamber was tense, filled with the representatives of species that were struggling to understand what humanity had done. "Honored council members," Sungmin said, "we are the Deathworlders. We evolved in hell and made it our home. When the universe itself declared war on consciousness, we didn't hide or negotiate. We fought back." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed fear, anger, and grudging admiration. "That protection now extends to every thinking being in this galaxy," he continued, "because someone has to stand guard against the forces that would snuff out the light of consciousness itself." The vote was closer than before, but humanity retained its place in the coalition. More importantly, they had earned something they had never had before: the knowledge that when the impossible threat came, they had been ready to face it. In the months that followed, Prometheus detected similar swarm activities in 12 other galaxies. For the first time in cosmic history, someone was going to fight back on behalf of all thinking life. Humanity began construction of new final war fleets, preparing for their next mission. They were no longer just explorers or traders in the galactic community. They had become something more important: the guardians of consciousness itself, standing watch against the forces that would return the universe to cold, empty silence. Deathworlders had found their true purpose among the stars. When everything that could think was threatened with extinction, humanity would be there to fight the impossible fight, because that was what they did best and what the universe needed most.